nhớ dòng hai dòng sát tại tàu pe giờ phong như trong lần cho tôi cái món nó mới chỉ là còn pe mong district called ministry moments nếu nó pe yêu sai cho phang cái ta mission là chỉ phang cái sa một dòng nếu cũng dòng sát cái mua cái sư phụ nhà vang mua cái sư phụ trả mong yang mua cái sư phụ tu lì tôi còn pe cho nó and today we're going to talk about missions ha pe yêu đi cha pe giờ ban trên sai yêu cú sát ở phang cái chăn ta cho một dòng phang cái yêu lu cho and so, Sivituli, you've been the Envision Bangkok coordinator for about 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years.
You do a lot of, you get a lot of interns coming in, and you develop missional leaders, and that's kind of your goal and what you guys do.
Yeah, that's the heartbeat of Envision, and so we're just a small piece of that. Yeah.
So how many people do you get like coming in every year?
Oh man, on average, I would say anywhere from 5 to 8 interns. They come for 1 month to, for a year. But teams, we get about anywhere from 5 to 8 teams, about 8 team members per team. So anywhere you're looking about 60, 70, 80 people throughout the year that come through our site. They come from winter break, summer break, fall break, spring break, and then not including we get a lot of guests that come through Bangkok.
So how many of the 60 to 80 young people are Hmong people? How many people do you get from the Hmong district coming in?
Honestly, I would say on average probably 10%.
10%.
And a lot of times the interns, they will come on their own, and then there's some that come through the church, and some they just form their own team and then they come.
I see.
So it's a mix, but they're all somewhat connected to a Hmong Alliance Church.
Okay. Now, if there was like a 20-year-old, and mission, what is it all about? And he comes to Thailand. Yeah. What does he expect to do? What do you put him through to develop them?
Yeah. So our goal is we want to give them some really practical tools so that they can live it out there in a safe environment with us. But hopefully when they go back to the local church that they can get involved with it, with the church. And so our big theme, be intentional about doing whatever it takes to move people towards Christ. And so we want them to grow in their own personal pursuit of God. How can this person be more intentional about reading the Bible, spending time alone with God? And then how do they intentionally help a brother and a sister in Christ? So how can I be intentional? We're stuck in traffic. How can I ask about your life? How can I encourage you? And then we do that together as a team to reach Okay. And so that's the overall theme, but there's so many components. So I always tell people we're a very highly relational site. Our schedule is not like a tour group now. So the first thing we do is we get you doing a scavenger hunt, a selfie scavenger hunt. So we'll send you out, you guys go take pictures by this mall, or go ask this university student what their favorite Thai food is. But at that same time, it gets all your nerves out. So like the evangelism part, like Chichon Chaila. But at the same time, it gives you opportunities to meet new people. And so as you're talking to them, we also set up a kind of, not a big, but a mid-sized kind of event. So like, let's say I meet you, I'm talking to you for the first time. I'll be like, oh, we're watching the newest Spider-Man movie this week. It's coming out Thursday. Me and my American friends, you want to come join? And Thai people love Americans. So it's an easy thing for them to say, okay, I'll come. Can I invite my friends too? And then they come together. But it's really helping them to understand that it's not that scary, not that hard, but it's organized so that they can make it more organic.
So I'm hearing you that the first thing that you really want them to do is just to get outside of their comfort zone, try to meet people, be relational, build relationships and things like that.
Yeah, and try different foods.
Now, Kisu Chamong, you are the pastor of City on the Hill. It's a next generation church. You're working with a lot of like second gen, younger generation people. Do you see a passion, a bit for missions, for evangelism? What are you experiencing in your church?
Yeah, in my experience with the next gen, serving and passion for evangelism mission, they have that passion, but you have to give them that purpose, right? If there isn't that purpose, there isn't a reason for what they're doing, they can also quickly find passion elsewhere, right? But when you give them that purpose, they wholeheartedly run straight at it and run passionately towards that. And so I'd see the next gen, they do that. Sometimes they're described as being disloyal because they don't stick with this or they jump to the next thing, but it's because they see where their gifts, their talents can be used at, and if the church isn't giving them that opportunity to use that gift, then they'll go somewhere else. And I've seen in Wausau, when I was in Wausau and other places, where sometimes some churches, they just don't give our young people, the next generation, that chance to serve, and then they'll go through a non-CMA, a non-alliance organization. It's not that they're not doing missions, they are doing missions, and they're passionate about that. It's just that I believe we have to give them that purpose and the opportunity.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Now you guys have a young lady, and she is getting ready. She's going through the interviews. She's
Yes.
coming through some of the last stages of the interviews. She wants to go to Asia. You guys are looking to partner with her, to support her in her journey. How excited is your church, and what are you guys been thinking?
Yeah, so Kyung, she's kind of like my little daughter because, we were in Wausau together, and so I was the youth pastor when she was actually a youth, and I'm so excited for her. And so it's almost kind of like here, I'm a spiritual father and so excited for her. But the church itself is excited because Kyung, she's built a relationship with so many people at Koa, a city on a hill, that everybody's excited for her. It's been 2 long years where she's been plugging in, pushing forth missions and building these relationships with everybody. And so everybody's excited to see what she's going to do and what God's going to do through her. And so, I constantly hearing people like, how can we help Chong to maybe financially? How can we help Chong resources? How can we help Chong when she's overseas like that? And so our church is ready to partner with her, and we're just waiting for the next step where like, okay, what can we do? And once she figures out like where she's going and CMA gives her the assignment, then I think we'll be able to put the puzzles together.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Su Chamon, for sharing that. Sivinyava, thank you for joining us today as well. Sivinyava is the senior pastor for True Life Alliance Church, Nyacho, North Carolina. And các thứ sư phụ họ tông đấy chăng là
Cái bí bệnh trên nó đó họ True Life ya sang ở sẽ cầu là.
Yeah, and mấy bệnh chân cứ focus a lot on missions. Mấy ấy bà cứ cú sát rồi sang cứ chant tự chúng mong cho tôi nên làm văn chữ. And can you share a little bit about the church growth? Like maybe in the past 5 years, mấy bệnh chân tao lúc lại chăng ha?
Ya thọ bé là bí bệnh trên thì bé chân số là identify bệnh trên họ purpose để vì cha bé thiết bí bệnh trên. And Jesus họ hậu lựa Jesus là họ luôn để tên nó ya này là what chi này. Thì bây build new church bây giờ build according to the plan on it or. Thì bây giờ more mission or bây giờ họ purpose cho bây giờ bí bệnh trên đó. Thì bây giờ structure bây giờ church to evangelize bây giờ community thì sao bây giờ luôn oversee every year bây giờ bây giờ even very young people who stand overseas bây giờ chúng ta một đây là bây giờ một Mexico một số tuổi bây giờ một là rất kinh doanh long này là bỏ họ vẫn chưa được chi vẫn chưa ổn được là để là longแต่ว่าbây giờ thế này là cố share more share some chat some cho nên là chẳng vẫn chưa so the first 5 years họ bé bệnh chân mà bé grow chẳng hạn là họ bé more share thì bé chẳng aim cho Jesus lúc họ phiêu Jesus lạiแต่tất cả记录上mà bé bệnh chân là để bây giờ tôi nên là trong để bé beginning to worry tất cả là internal problem tất cả là một để cho nó chỉ lo bây giờ ba lại đi cho nó một tấm mình rồi cho marriage là problem nhau là lúc nào là bây giờ đó là đời đi nó chỉ thà bây giờ tin nên tất cả là focus rồi cho internal problem là chỉ bây kind of slow rồi so bây grow within 10 years bây grow from ít bộ có bây tôi chỉ cho một li ít phá thì bây bộ tôi chỉ cho xã tân ra chỉ bây lúc campus thì là bây lúc campus nhất là thô sa bây lúc campus nhất là thái tây thì taประมาณนี้พาไปปวดเลย
Okay. Yeah, that's great to hear. Soon you want John Shakin no that me Panjang grew from 100 people go pay lane mo cho people lane and that is amazing. It's also good to recognize that you guys grew really fast. Ha cho tôi này cái mấy cái long jevan chuyện đó là chỉ cho chỉ cho chan đó có bộ ta là 80% nhờ cho anh cha ha 80% nhờ là cho cái bố yên jeng là đó chỉ bố mà nó còn mấy sự.
Yeah, lo church je ya yo ya le pe man on je na ya ka shi cham pe te ka to han je na so pe lo ha phe pe yin chi sa attract cho church hopper pe cho mo pa cho la cho chi to no so mo jong cho te na lan cha ma chu na teยังไม่จอเลยจะเลยเขียนหล่อก่อนก็อยู่อะไรจะอยู่อะไรอะไรอย่างหล่อที่นั่นแต่เมื่อสัตว์จะว่าเขียนหรือขอหล่อก่อนไปวันนี้ยังมั่ว background ว่ามุ่งเชื่อดูอะไรนะจะ100%หา100%จะหลังยังเชื่อ
Okay, so 40%จะ the growth from it Panjang 40%จะกันที่ previously Christian 60%จะกัน new believers จะลงจิงชามาand that's still pretty amazing to see that Senior Val, and thank you for sharing that. Now I wanted to just ask the three of you a question. If there is a church and they're just struggling with evangelism, they're struggling with missions, actually they're just trying to keep people in from leaving, like and these are churches that feel like, man, we have so much to do, like just to survive, just so much on our plate. Time, resource, mission, evangelism. What would you say to a church like that? What kind of advice?
Yo lo cho pen jeng le thao lai le nyo za le ko lu xiang te la pi da ka lo ti da ka lo mo nyo she to le cho te man nyo to le pen jeng la te la mo sai le cho cái lo là cho mình nhỏแต่ไปจะnhỏมาแต่มันไปจะลมาแต่มันไปจะเรามาแต่มันแต่ mission เนี่ยย้อนเลยถ้าเราช่วยจ่าเลยน้องไปมาหมอจ่อเราช่วยจ่าได้สิไปจะนั่นนะมาแต่มันเลยอย่าไปจิป้าเลยเราอย่าต่อยเราอย่าป้องแต่ไปเอ็มไปขอ target ตะการเราตัว internal เลยซึ่งแต่ส่วน mission จะเลยชัวร์เลยนะขออย่าป้าไปก็ไปชอบป้องมุตกินได้นั่นแต่ยังจะอย่าไปจะต้องลองเก็บไปตัว structure เด็กเกี่ยวนุ่งเกี่ยวไปรู้หนังนะรู้ kingdom life มาไปจะมวยข้อ standard kingdom life เดี๋ยวไปจะที่นั่นแต่นั่นแหละไปเป็นเชิงนะจะไปยังมัวโอนหนุนลันเด small group ต่อจะ small group แต่อีลูวิกเลยจะว่าอีข้อ purpose sẽ là bé một chi lúc purpose cho bé bên trên cho tao qua để lúc thì ý worship lúc thì ai fellowship lúc thì bé ya ministry lúc thì plow ya discipleship lúc thì chi ya mission na chứ bé cho small group ya cho balance cho họ phía na
yeah so I'm hearing you that a lot of times they get distracted by internal needs, internal struggle, focus, lose focus and so more your path, your purpose, force that you need challenge each of the 5 purpose.
Intentionally man I think it's just a reminder
and a serious warning to the church that when we don't do what we're called to do, to go and make disciples of all nations, then we're forgetting our purpose of who we are. And so I would just say that missions is such a crucial part of the church that if we just become so inwardly focused, then I think we've lost sight of who we are called to be. And so that would be my first thing. I would also say it needs to start with the pastor and leadership down too, and try to get the leadership to inspire and to motivate missions and encourage missions, and so that the whole church would have that heart to do missions. And so I think if the leadership can continue to share this vision of go make disciples, right? I think ultimately, kind of like in the book Bringing Back the King, right? Like we do missions because we want to bring the King back. And when the gospel is sent all over to all the nations, then the end will come, then Christ will come. And do we love and want Jesus to come back, right? Because if we want Jesus to come back, then we're going to do evangelism. And if we don't do that, then maybe there's a heart problem that the church has.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Sister Lee? What do you think?
See, I'm not your typical pastor. I went to be a missionary. And then, yeah, you know, and and then when the gospel penetrated that area, that campus, a church kind of came because of that. And so in our structure, like what you were saying, we already structured that there's church for discipleship pieces, worshiping, but we always had this game night where it was strictly outlet for a church to meet new people in a way that matches that area, you know? And so even, especially during COVID, we had to figure out different ways to do that. And we had to go online and do different ways. But again, I think as churches, and I would encourage them, there's certain things that as pastors we get to do. We get to organize an event. We get to organize prayer. We get to organize evangelism events. But we need to empower to be intentional that that's not the end of it all. That's just some way to meet somebody. Then you invite them to your home. You invite them to go to a movie with you, with your family. And that's where the relationship piece builds. And so I would say right now for churches and pastors, remain faithful. Be encouraged. Like our church is small back in Bangkok, but as people left, God brought in different people. And so whoever comes, remain faithful to them, build them up, but also remind them of what God has called us to do and to keep going and keep going out. And just a quick story, there's a Lions church, and during the COVID season, they said they were so worried about their people coming back. But all of a sudden, God convicted the pastor, and he said, we need to set up something for our church to think outside. So they started doing prayer walks through their neighborhoods. They formed teams to go and say, hey, are you struggling with something financially? Are you struggling with this? You need help with your house? Their church were mobilized into their neighborhoods. And out of that, they also said, why don't we send money overseas instead of trying to keep it here? So that's how they got connected with us. And they sent a huge part of their funding to us. And I just went to visit the church, and the pastor was like, we've never given this much before. So we're nervous that money's not coming in. But God is a provider, and as leaders, we need to create some organized things, but empower people to organically live out missions.
Yeah, that's great, Sivituli. I think you just kind of answered my next question that I was going to ask. Like, if a pastor, he really wants to get his church started on evangelism and missions, Dashi Zhonggole Panjing has been stuck focusing on internal issues or trying to do so much that we have lost focus on evangelism or reaching the ones outside. I mean, what kind of advice would you guys give a pastor or leaders in those positions to try to kickstart the church and to start evangelism or missions or to get engaged again?
ก็จะ像我被我找到的 Middle East George W. Bush là the president là tôiไปโลTwin Tower เนี่ยเราไปนิวยอร์กไปGeorge W. Bush เนี่ยแต่ if we don't send war to them they will send war to us แต่ลองแต่ย่อกูรู้เชื่อนะแต่ว้าวอย่าไปจีซาcho kiểu cho trongต่อ front line นะจะแล้วยศาแล้วต่อตรงย่อจะแล้วศาแล้วจะนั่งต่อตัวต่อก่อ same thing เขาไปเชื่อเลยจงอย่างก่อนนะแต่ถ้าไป internal focus ไปจะตีหนึ่งของตนต่อจะแต่ enemy เนี่ยมัว opportunity ซาจะตั้งแต่ตัวไปดอไปเชื่อนะแต่สิถ้าไปซาไปจนหนึ่งมุชัดแต่จมูกจงตัวอุตรนอมาเนื้อตัวมูพอแท้เนื้อเขาเชื่อจะนิชิชก่อไปเดียวแต่นิชิชบอดไปเชื่อ
Now, one more question. How about the individual? Tu to nei la chi tu lo ku ni nya choi pan jen ku ni sang ko pe mo evangelism ni sang ko pe o missions ta shi jon la pan jen ni chi do and day la chi ni chi ora na ya. What would you give the advice to someone in that position?
Do you want to go?
Yeah, I
You
can go. I was actually a product of that, you know, to be honest. I love the Hmong churches, but we weren't doing mission trips. And so I heard of another church, and so I just went with them. But I came back on fire for God. And so what I would say to even the younger people, that God is stirring in them to do something. And it goes back to this whole story of organized events and organic stuff. We want the church to approve it first before we do it. But I say, just start loving people. Just start connecting with people. And then when it starts happening, then you bring it to your church. And a lot of times I would say, this might not be the answer that the church likes, but I think this is the answer that's going to get our young people out there to do things. The best way would be to partner with the church. But I still think if God's putting on your heart, be obedient to what God is calling you to do. If you start a Bible study, you don't need to announce it to the world. We're having Bible study Thursday night. Just have Bible study at your house. Invite the people that you've been outreaching to, develop them, minister to them. And then you're going to eventually get to a point where you either have to plug them into a church or you start your own church. And so it's easy to all of a sudden disciple them and bringing them to your church for corporate worship. But again, it can be very organic. It doesn't have to be very organized in a lot of those things. And I get a lot of those people that come to our site because they just wanted to come. And then I said, go back to your local church. One of the things we do at the end is we debrief them. We say, go back to your pastor, go back to your spiritual leader, unpack all the things God's taught you, and ask them how you can help build the church there, so that it starts a partnership, that they can just utilize the things that God's taught them and not just throw it away. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say, like, to the young person who's looking for a way to grow in evangelism, but the church isn't doing that for them, providing. I mean, it's not to overstep your pastor, but I mean, go approach your pastor first, and ask your pastor for the resources and for training and to be mentored and to be discipled, right? And so I would say that I would point them back to you, actually. You are the resource.
Right? Just call this guy.
Good. We'll send you to Bangkok. Spend a month there. Spend a summer there.
But honestly, like, I feel like I was kind of in that place where, like, we're so much in our Hmong church bubble that we don't know anything outside of the Hmong church, right? Until I went to college, and then there's like all these streams that have opened up, and I'm like, oh wow, there's this board and that board and this board, and so I think being able to find somebody who is able to open up the streams for you so that you can go and grow in that knowledge. And so get discipled, get mentored by somebody who's passionate about mission, because I'm sure that person can point you to the right place or to the right person too as well.
ได้ข่าวว่ากุกะเต่าเทมายาไปเพ่งยอจูหายก็ไปจอซิฟูจอ board Hmong district everybody ยอจู approve agree everything ไปมาว่าแต่ usually ยังว่าชิเตียแต่เขาเลยสนใจเลยนะแต่กูไม่ทุกคนอยู่หัวแดนิสก็น้อบ้านเจ้าห้องก็แต่มัวแอฟริกานะใช่เจตัวจีนให้ตัวเนี้ยแต่กูน้อบ้านเจ้าก็มัวแอฟริกาตัวเนี้ยแต่เขานู่นกูน้อเท่าเจียอยู่อยู่บ้านเจ้าให้เลยเจียกับแพทย์แต่ยังไม่รู้ที่เชื่อถือยังไม่รู้ denomination ถึง just go to Africa เรียกว่าเจ้าให้ซะแต่กับแพทย์ก็จะของอย่างอีเราเอาไปรู้เท่าแต่ว่าน้อรู้ชัวร์ตรงกันแต่ no อีเรารู้เท่าซะแต่ก็เท่าเก๋นอกแต่ว่าเชื่อแต่ก็ยังไงรู้เท่าซะแต่是 which country แต่ก็จะเลยแต่ก็จะมองแต่แม่มาแอฟริกาเราอย่างก็จะเลยใช่ก็แต่ okay how about this one แต่ก็มูจ่อต่อใช้ยี่ห้อนะก็เฉพาะแต่จะยังมูกระตือยังมูเที่ยวโฮเทลยังมูเที่ยวจะ missionary agency ที่จะเชื่อว่าช่วยตัวสายตัว missionary ต้นเชียงก็ต่อแต่ตัว missionary ต้นยิงก็ต่อใช้ยี่ห้อแต่ในปุยเอาตัววันจุดก็ตัวปากู这个的，我有去报了，我去后有到阿非加，是有去报了某一几条，แต่要我就喺度講就要做要有了，就講有多就有我就講有多就嚟多先，即係個啲咧冇把ตัว missionary， 一ตัว missionary 開 TE， CTE level 2，即係 level 1啊，แล้วถัดตัว level 1 level 2是 OK ใช่ไหมแต่ฉันจะ TE ที่มาแล้วมั่วก่อพออ่ะ即係แล้วก็ตาจะจิชัวอินนอร์ตัวละ3or 4นะเจละเทเลติโตไปรู้จักกันตัว Vision International University จะดัตตัว Discover เทเลซาจะ curriculum มันตัวละแต่ก็อยากตัว oversee เขาก็ TE นะที่ใช้เขาก็อยู่ใน Bachelor Degree เนี่ยตัวรู้จักกันตัวนะแต่ฉันแล้วมั่วเราจะเชียร์ตัว40,000 students so every 8 hours ตัวละจ่าย1 pension
wow
every 8 hours 20 months เลยจ่ายตัว1 pension so they have not break direct break ละคร8 hours per church is because auto person เนี่ยจะเรียนน้องมองว่าช่วยให้ก็จะเรียนหมู่ใช่ไหม so จะเรียนอะไรจะเอาไปปอแต่เดี๋ยวก็จะจังก่อ everybody support ก็ถึงเนี่ยที่เชียร์ก็มาเรียนหมู่แต่ usually ที่เท่าก็จะเท่าวันเรียนรู้ organization แล้วก็ว่าอะไรแต่เชียร์ก็มองว่าจุดชัวร์ก็จะเรียนหมู่ก็นั่นแหละ it's okay คุณใช่แต่มองได้ช่วยอยากจะซื้อจะหมู่เรียนได้ที่ไหน
Yeah, follow God's calling for your life, and if you are called to serve with Alliance Missions, we're here, Bemon District. But if God calls you and He's sending you by without any kind of support, and that's you being obedient, obeying, we support that. We pray for you. We encourage you, and as long as you're following God's calling for your life.
Yeah.
Well, I meet a lot of young people. And the idea, they're passionate about reaching the lost, about ending slavery. They have big dreams. And at first I noticed I used to just shut it down, right? And I was like, I had to go repent to them and say, hey, I'm sorry, God's calling you to this. The reason why I haven't been very supportive is the way your character does not match it. And so what I noticed as one of my roles as a leader, that they trust me, how do I develop their character to match God's calling on their life? So a part of what I do is I get maybe 10 days, 1 year with them. You say you want to be a church planter? I'll test the waters with you. I'll walk alongside of you, give you books to read, train you, give you insight that I'm thinking through. But then I want to see it too. And then I can either say, yep, that's kind of the direction that you need to go. Or maybe we got to rethink some things. Or go back and you need to be discipled a little bit more. Develop these characters. You're not there yet. But don't give up on what God's put on your heart. And I think sometimes we just see these people running, chasing dreams, and it kind of crashes sometimes too. Because the character doesn't support what God's called them, and they fall into sin or they fall into some other things.
แต่เขาก็อยากให้เขาสนใจแต่เชียร์แต่ชดตุยอดในแต่กูยังโมนะก็จะได้ซาทันเราแต่เนี่ยจุดเรา identify กันแล้วเราของ give แต่เรา able to preach เรา able to teach เรา này cho bao cho really cho basic theology
Yeah.
này cho
Definitely.
bây giờ nằm bây giờ mà này train lead the pastoral group and thằng này tí cho này pastoral group này grow rồi mà bây giờ trust này mà vậy là họ luyện đấy này cô chia thì này cho nên nhớ cho tôi vậy đó cho nên hey I wanna be missionary
Yeah, God told me.
但是你冇拿来引导嘛，
Yeah.
教练大家冇嘢做係嗰啲，又或者好個節目，
Yeah.
但是嘛，俾住個俾 support 個呢，俾住包 support 但是嘛，個夢又個我當弄啦，對上我冇住人天能 support 個。
All right, thank you, Sifu Tu Li, Sifu Jamong, and Sifu Nyevan for your words of wisdom today. We appreciate having you guys on Hmong District Ministry Moments, sharing your wisdom from your past experience and expertise for many years, 10 years in Bangkok, and many years in Warsaw, and also City on the Hill. Sifu Nyevan has been one of our pastors, been serving in Hmong District and many churches and planted many churches, and so thank you so much for just being here with us today. And Osha ku pe ka phong yu so lai so tu ku no me to kon pe lu Hmong District Missions Moment, and tamaji phong ko mo pu me ha. We'll see you next time.